Turn on my camera. Shalom, everyone. Can I see people are muted, which is amazing. Wow, what a blessing. People are gathering. Not even just on Jewish time. Look at this. Awesome to see your faces. Like, what was a good tear to my eyes. Awesome. Everyone should know Kathy's here too. I'm blocking her, but she's in the house. Torah Tech Maven.
I would have everybody check their sound just to make sure that we can hear them.
Yeah, so there's a way to check it, just like say check.
Just have them say, say hello, unmute and say hi.
Okay, how about this? We're just going to go around and do a checkup of our sound. How about I call on you and each person just unmute when I call on you, okay? And then just say, shalom or something. Okay, sorry, Ellen, you unmute yourself, just check your sound.
Shalom.
What's up, Ellen? Yeshkar. I'll give you thumbs up. Stephanie, next up. You can mute yourself, Ellen.
Hello.
All right, shalom. Next up, Terry. Yeah.
Hi.
Shalom,
Hi,
Terry, what's up?
everyone.
Awesome, thanks, Terry. Okay, Mark. Which Mark is this? Mark, you there?
Hello,
Mark, what's your last name?
Goldhopper.
Oh, Goldhopper. Hey, Mark, good to see you, my friend, or hear from you. Shalom, Weiss J. Who is this?
Hi, this is Jenny.
Awesome, Jenny. Nice to meet you. Welcome. Anna Lemma. Press unmute. Yeah, I know you're looking. There you go. Awesome. Okay, Susan's iPhone. To me, there's Susan. Who's this? Susan? Oh, Goldhopper? Susan, you can unmute yourself. Susan, you there? You hear me? Oh, there you go. It's Susan Goldhopper. There you go. Susan, just check your sound if you'd like. Do you know how to unmute? All right, she'll work on it.
And then have you press record yet?
Oy vey. Good call. Thank God, Kathy. All right.
So
Down here.
No, close that.
Close that.
Yeah, it just kind of hover over the bottom of right
Yeah.
there. So on the right, there's a button that says
Record.
Yeah, so it
To
says
cloud.
Okay.
Okay.
And then you're good.
Okay. All right, and all our Facebook Live friends, shalom. Welcome. We're about to begin. We're just kind of getting technical stuff done with our straight up Rabbi of Technology, Kathleen Kaplan. I think we're ready to rock. So I think we're going to, this for me, this is Jewish time, 12:03. Okay, but we're going to start. All right. So a couple quick things about Zoom. For those, some of you I think are old timers and regulars, but a couple things I just want to note. First of all, it's good to mute yourself when you're not talking. Yes, Susan's not on mute, but I can see you, Susan. I can mute them, Nachon.
No, I wanted to put on mute. Don't get mad at me.
If I press mute,
You should be able to mute.
mute audio?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. No, it didn't work. Yeah. Okay. All right. So one thing is to mute. Second thing is that I'm not such an expert at administrating. I'm learning. I know some of you think, well, the rabbi is good at leading. Generally speaking, yes. But in this context, I'm learning. So I invite you to please have your patience and rahmanis and compassion with me. But I'm just so excited to see everybody. And lastly, I want to say that we are experimenting. We're doing this on Zoom. It's a class. And also we're exposing to Facebook Live just my face, not yours. So it allowed people who didn't know about this class and things to hear about it as well. And on Facebook Live, I actually put pictures of the text we're going to study together. Okay. Last thing is we're going to have copies of the text, right, Kathy?
Yes. If they go to the calendar link that we sent out yesterday,
Okay.
there's a link to the text that they can.
All right, make sure everyone heard it. So if you went to the calendar link that we sent out yesterday about this class, you'll see texts that were as a link in there, Kathy?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a link in there for the text. It'll say Pesach in a time of crisis. Something very light, okay? And let's make sure everyone gets a look at that. That'll be helpful.
You know what? If you go to the website and pull it up, then you could share your screen.
Okay. Kathy's telling me I can share my screen and also help find that. So I'm going to bethmeyer.org.
Calendar, yeah.
Calendar on the bethmeyer.org website.
Yeah, go down to today's date.
Today's date's the 20th. Celebrating Pesach in time of crisis.
Yeah, and then
click here.
Click here. Yeah.
Okay. And now I can go share this screen.
You should be able to share
Okay.
your screen.
And I go there to,
Of course, I've never done it with the double screen, but
let's see, we'll
share
find it. So where's the share screen, Kathy?
Middle of the
Share?
menu. Yeah. Try that. Oh, there you go. Look at your options.
Kol hakavod. Ah, I'm sharing it on my screen as well.
Right. So they at that point should be able to see it.
Okay. So you guys can see it on Zoom, can maybe see my share on my screen. Is that helping as well? Raise your hand if you can see my share screen. Yafeh. Okay.
Yes.
This is like
You
shehechian.
in a little bit, it's really small on your screen.
Huh. Make it larger.
Okay. Down bottom right.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've got size controls down there.
Is that better? Does that help, Analema? Okay.
That's much better, thank you.
Much better? Okay. Don't want to break your eyes here, guys. All right. Trying to help people. Okay. So what I want to do here is say this whole class is the kavanah and intention is this wonderful post-it. Okay? We're going to oive ourselves to this Pesach class. All right? One of my favorite things. And bottom of the corner here it says, shalom out. Okay? By the end here, I hope we have lots of shalom. Not just oive in our heart, but shalom. And I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to be with you guys. I miss you terribly. You might know I'm a little bit of an extrovert, so it's like it's hard to be stuck. I do love my family, but I'm ready to be out and with you guys and to see you all and to study some Torah together. It's truly, truly a pleasure. For the sake of time and get into Torah study, I usually go around and have everyone introduce themselves, say a few words. Maybe we'll do that a little bit in the course of the class because I know some of us are really eager to get down into the nitty gritty. But I do want to say that I am going to ask for you to participate. I'm going to raise some questions. And I hope you won't be shy. This is your chance for interaction. After some of us, lots of days of not a lot of interaction. So I know some of you might be introverted and say, I don't usually raise my hand in class. I'm going to nudge you, okay? Maybe even going to call on you, okay, to read a little bit. Of course, you can pass. I'm not, this is not meant to be Pharaoh and the Hebrews, okay? But I am trying to engage you and make this as much like a quote-unquote class as possible, especially you on Zoom, okay? Really, because the Facebook Live people really can't do it. Okay. Any burning, we have a chat option, so if you have a burning question, you could put that out to the group, but anything burning for me, I'm not going to be looking at chat so much. So if something's going on technically, definitely feel free to raise your hand and let me know if something's going on. At this point, before we get started and say a blessing, is there anything I need to know from anyone in our group in Zoom particularly? Anything you need to let me know? Baruch Hashem. Okay. We're going to recite the blessing of study of Torah, which is the standard Baruch Atah, la'asok, which means to busy oneself, b'divrei, in the study of Torah. La'asok b'divrei Torah. I want everyone just to try to take a breath. It's been hard to breathe with all of this mishigas. But a nice breath where your stomach distends a little bit and what do you call it? Your diaphragm. Thank God that we can be together even virtually and can study Torah to give us uplift, I hope. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Can I get a muted amen? Okay. You could unmute. Okay, good. I got an amen. Got my amen corner now. Okay. I want to say, Kathy, thank you so much. Kathy may have to leave at some point. She was here as my rabbi of tech support. I want to thank you so much, Kathy. Okay. First text. What first thing I want to do here? We are clearly in a challenging time. Extraordinary, unprecedented time. We're already thinking towards Passover, and we are working on programs specifically for the Seders, for the week, for Shabbat. We're lining things up. Me, Rabbi Jenny, Kathy, and others. So be ready for more things. The goal of this class, and I hope that we're going to offer probably one or more per week going forward, is to start thinking of texts and ideas that we could perhaps study on Pesach, however we are for the Seder, or get us ready even spiritually in our hearts for Pesach, which is under an exceptional circumstance. I don't need to tell you. Now, one of the great ironies is this in some ways could be like the first Passover. How is it like the first Passover? Because the first Passover was extraordinary circumstances, if you think about it. It was a time we were enslaved. We were told we were going to be free, but you can imagine our people were nervous about, knew when is that exactly going to happen, which is very parallel to our situation of, enslavement now, you might say, or being held in. We are lacking a sense of freedom, very parallel, lack of freedom. Even down to things like food. The matzah story. We were limited in our food choices because we were running out of Egypt, and we had limited food. And right now, thank God food is okay as long as we don't hoard it. But the idea that we have to worry about our food and what are we going to eat and how do we deal with that? And even how do we get kosher for Passover food and what's going to happen there? So in some ways, this is a revisiting back to what it was like at the first Passover, even to the point, I want to say, that on the night of Passover, when the angel of death passed over our houses, and it was, this moment, and we put the blood on the doorpost and the lintel, in Hebrew it's called Leil Shimurim. It was a night of watching, and we were told to stay in our houses. You could argue, I guess, ancient quarantine, stay in our houses, because there was like a fear, as a night of scared, worried while the angel passed over, which again is parallel to what's happening now. So the question is then, what's Passover going to be like? If Passover is about freedom, liberation, going out, eating like in luxurious ways and with people, Gewalt, all these things are up in some degree up for debate for this Passover. So then the question is, how do we look at some of the traditional texts of Passover, both in Haggadah, but here we're actually looking at some of the texts from rabbinic literature about Passover, or from the Torah about the story of Passover, in new ways, given the current crisis. So of course I have a couple ideas I'm going to throw out to you, but I want to study these texts together and then see what you might say, not only what they say in the past, but how might we actually think about them for Passover now in the coronavirus situation. Okay. Any questions before we move forward to our first text? Okay, awesome. If you can see the text on my screen, or you have a copy of the text from bethmeyer.org, or those on Facebook Live, you can see it. I've posted them as pictures on Facebook Live. We're going to read this first one about the Maimonides, the great medieval doctor, physician, and rabbi. He was born in Spain. He made his way to Egypt. He became the number one doctor of the king of Egypt at that time. And he also spent an enormous amount of time, tremendous influence of writing all types of rabbinic literature, theology. His famous book was The Guide for the Perplexed, but he's also written things, the Mishnah Torah, a lot about Jewish law. This is specifically from the Mishnah Torah about Jewish law, describing what he considers in simple Hebrew and our translation in English, what is the main thing you need to do on Passover regarding telling the story. So we want to read this from his perspective, but I'm going to ask you guys to say, eventually, get ready, how might this change? How might this be profound? How might we adapt given our current situation? I'm just to say, like, when we ask the question, why is this night different than all other nights? Gewalt, how is this Passover different than perhaps all of our other Passovers that most of us have ever experienced? What's it going to mean? So just to give you an example. Okay. We're going to give our first shot for a volunteer to perhaps read out loud. We're going to give it a shot here. Is there someone on our Zoom call who has the holy chutzpah to be our shechia, our nachshon, who's going to jump in the water first and perhaps read out loud the text where it says, it is a mitzvah? Anybody willing? Stephanie kol hakavod. All right, Stephanie, please unmute yourself. This is Stephanie Weber, relatively recent new connector to Beth Meyer, who moved here. She's a teacher as well. We're glad to have you, Stephanie. Let's just
There's just a little English on the page, though. Can you scroll down so I can...
Oh, you're right. That's right, and I appreciate that help. Okay, yes. It is a mitzvah, and I'll scroll more as you read. Okay? Go ahead, Stephanie.
It is a mitzvah to tell the story of the exodus from Egypt to the children, even if they don't ask about it on Pesach night. For the Torah says, and you shall tell it to your child. According to the child's ability, the parent should teach the child. How is this done? If the child is young or simple, the parent should say to the child, my child, all of us were slaves just like that maidservant over there and that slave over there in Egypt. And on this very night, the Holy One redeemed us and took us out to freedom. But if the child is older and wise, the parent should explain to that child what happened to us in Egypt and the miracles that happened through Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership. Everything should be explained according to the intellectual ability of the child.
And here's the
One
key.
must
Go ahead.
make-
Yeah, please, go ahead.
And one must make a change on Pesach night so that the children will see it and then ask questions and say, why is this night different from all other nights? And so that you will be invited to answer them. And you should say, so and so happened. How do you make the night different? One should give the children candies and nuts, remove the table right in front of them before they eat, and cover the matzah in a hidden way, and other things like this. If one does not have a child, then the other spouse should ask questions. If one does not have a spouse, a group should get together and ask each other, even if all the people sitting around are great Torah scholars. If a person is alone, she or he should ask him or herself the question, why is this night different?
Awesome, Stephanie. First of all, thank you so much. Beautiful job. Okay. There is so much in here, and a lot here on the classic situation of children and what you need to teach the children. I actually would like just to start the conversation down where it says the number 3. You see as we're here, I'm going to color it in. And one must make a change on Pesach night so that children will see it and then ask questions and say, why is this night different than all other nights? Okay. Some of you learned this lesson before, but I'll make sure we're on the same page. What is the classic thing that we do in the Passover Haggadah, which sets up the questions of the night? What's it called? Someone raise their hand. All right, Ellen, Vakasha, unmute.
It's the 4 questions, the Firkasha.
Firkashas, exactly. Excellent, Ellen. And they're put there, some people in some traditions, the youngest person in the room, it doesn't have to be a child per se, chants them for everyone else, everyone does it together. Beautiful, Ellen. All right. But this does not say that. Maimonides, who's no chopped liver, doesn't say, recite the 4 questions. In fact, there's no mention of the 4 questions. What's he saying then? He says, you must make a change so that people will see the change and then organically ask questions. So to be clear, some people think they haven't done a Passover Seder unless the 4 questions are done. And in my house, that's why we make Natan do it. It's good. It's good teasing. Okay, I get it. I understand. You want to, make the youngest person do it. It can be fun. But it's actually not required. What's required? Making changes that inspire questions. And so look what he says the changes should be. Give them candies and nuts. Basically, give them dessert first. So you go and have a table and you pass out dessert first. And then someone at the table says, wait, what's going on here? Why are we having dessert first? And you go, aha, you've asked the question. We don't need to ask the 4 questions because you've asked, why is this night different nights? They say remove the table before you eat. In rabbinic times, the way they used to eat was little trays, and you take the tray and each person got their own. And so what he says, take the table away. And it'd be like, wait a second, I'm hungry. Why are you letting me eat dinner? Aha, you asked the question. No more 4 questions. Okay, so just to understand, that's what the Maimonides is saying, is you should inspire conversation. All right, got a question from Ellen. Great, Ellen, please unmute.
Just out of curiosity, when did the 4 questions get added to the Haggadah?
Oh, what a great question. Such a good question. I can get back to you about that exactly. I don't know exactly. These things evolved over time. What I would say, what I do know is that the Mishnah, which was edited in 200, 220 CE, already has a listing of these questions that should be asked. Now, it's interesting. The Mishnah and something called the Tosefta, which is parallel to it in similar text timing, although the Mishnah is the combination of the Talmud, already lists, I think it's 3 questions, not 4, but 3. And to be more precise, I know you're calling them questions because that's what we call them, 4 kashas, but they're almost not really questions, they're kind of statements about how the night's different more than a question per se. They're kind of rhetorical-ish questions, but we call them questions. And it evolved over time to 4. There's 3 in the Mishnah. I think there's 4 in the Tosefta. They even have some slight differences between the 2. And then they evolved even more. So I would say the idea of those questions is quite old. It's, could be antiquity, 2,000 years. Did it get into the Haggadah the way the Haggadah is today? Took time. The whole Haggadah concept, widely shared books, printing press, that whole stuff. Generally speaking, Maimonides and others, they are already in the Middle Ages of kind of starting to write down what they consider to be the standard prayer service, the standard Haggadah. So usually there's around the Middle Ages when we think that sort of became standardized. But the idea of questions, the 4 questions, is early. Does that help, Ellen? This is a great question for Wikipedia, but don't do it during the class. Okay. Okay. All right. So the question I want to raise out here for this group is, when we come to either to the 4 questions and make our Seder different, the Seder's going to be absolutely different. We don't got to put candies on the table. In fact, I don't want to freak anyone out now, but there's already discussion amongst rabbis this year about not requiring the same level of Passover food practice strictures, because it may not be possible for people to get the Passover food. Or frankly, for nutritional reasons, we don't want to put anyone, God forbid, at risk in any way. The same type of neurotic extremist standards, which we usually have for Passover, maybe, and it's not formally yet. So then the question is, this Seder already is going to be different. So what kind of story are we going to share, and how are we going to relate it to our current time? I'm putting that as a question for you. What would you potentially do differently to inspire a conversation that relates this time, that relates to the Passover story? Have you thought about that already? Does anyone have some suggestions that would like to raise their hand as ideas that they've thought of, how they might make this story relevant given the current scenario? Or is that why you come to me? Anyone on Zoom thinking? I can see the brain cells. Who's Annalema? Vakasha. Great.
Usually to do the food shopping for Passover, it's going to a whole bunch of different stores to get this here and that there. And I'm trying to limit exposure for my family this year. So that could be a big difference just in
the preparation.
How I'm going to get everything.
Exactly. And let me think, even the shopping itself is part of the experience. And I think you're absolutely right. So the fact that we may not do the same type of shopping, or even I want to say maybe we're going to have a much more limited ability to cook or do what we want to do normally. I mean, we'll see. I'm not going to overstate it. I hope we will, but we don't know. Maybe we'll have a limited amount of matzah, for example. Just might not be as much matzah as we normally have. So we may have to share it in a different way, eat less of it, eat it with more intention, for example. Other thoughts about how this might be different for people? All right, I see Terry raising her hand. Please unmute yourself, Terry. Go ahead.
Yeah, was thinking about as difficult or as much of a sacrifice, minimal sacrifice would be for us. I think thinking about those for whom this has particular challenges. I mean, people, migrants, the 67,000 million people, people who are in the people who are in ICE detention, people who are homeless. Sort of thinking of those people who really maybe are not in a position to do social distancing or, get my food delivered. Mm-hmm. Really sort of exploring all the different implications would be something that would be important to do.
I think it's so profound, Terry. Thank you so much. I want to say that, right? The luxury, in a sense, of being able to choose matzah, right? To choose to eat matzah, a simple bread, when there are people that may not have regular bread, right? Or in fact, it's likely, sadly, even prior to the Pesach holiday, is a profound thing to talk about. What does it mean that matzah is not the lechem oni, just the bread of affliction, but maybe it's the bread of true nutrition? It really is our nutrients. And what are people living with in other situations? Exactly, those who can't social distance. Not to mention, you're already leading up to when we talk about the plagues, and we think about the story of the plagues, we often talk about these modern, contemporary, in many of our Seder tables, what are the contemporary plagues we're facing? Right now, we're all facing them, but some of us maybe even more acutely than others. Also, by the way, in other parts of the country more than others. Look at California. Look at New York. Who knows if that may soon be by us? We don't know. But that may be an opportunity in our Pesach table to really say, how are we blessed at Pesach? Not that we're denying ourselves, but that actually we have the blessing of even trying to celebrate this together. I think that's a very profound point. To think about others as well. You fit, Terry. Kol hakavod. Other thoughts about how they might tell the story or make it different given the current crisis? Right. Okay, Stephanie, Vakasha, unmute yourself, please.
Well, the Passover story is about how, something tragic does end, and so that's would going to be the case this time too.
Please, God. It's beautiful. I want to say something I think Stephanie's very profound. Pesach, I remember when we taught the kids originally when they were really young about Passover, it's like you're trying to get them a sense that our people were enslaved. Our people suffered. It's hard, like, suburban Ron, North Carolina. Do they get what it means? Slavery? Do they understand? Maybe they know this situation of American history and African-American struggle to some degree, but even that can feel distant. So how do we make the story really connect to who they are, like that they're part of this? And the truth is right now, even children, young people, all kinds of people can feel what it feels to be constricted, to be a little nervous, to be scared. And the end of Passover is a sign that there is hope, that we shouldn't give up. I want to say also that our people have been through terrible situations before. We've persevered. We've found a way. Doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean there's been tremendous sacrifice and loss. I think you're right, Stephanie, right? But that there's hope. I mean, imagine opening the door this year to Elijah. Just opening the door is a statement of faith because we're closing our door right now to be safe, right? We're being safe for closing the door. Not because we don't care, but we're closing the door metaphorically to the world because we want to protect ourselves. But maybe we open the door. Maybe we open an inner door in our house instead of the outer door to say that we're not going to shut ourselves off from the world and for the potential for hope. The open the door is also about calling on the Messiah for the potential for a future. And I think it's absolutely something that can give us promise. Maybe in a time we've never had it this way before. It's beautiful. Any other thoughts about hope or ideas of what Passover Seder how you might tell the story differently given the situation?
I'm interested in that idea of different ways of opening the door and different ways of sharing our Seder and inviting the stranger into our home, and what that might look like this year.
That's amazing. It's Jenny, right, Jenny?
Yes.
Jenny, awesome. Jenny, exactly. Look, this is a great irony too. The whole Passover thing is, open to all who are hungry, please come and eat, is like the famous line in the Haggadah. And to this year, we have to limit ourselves out of safety, in all likelihood have no guests in the traditional sense. And I think this is an important moment. Really thank God for this technology, for us ability. And we're going to do this, me and Rabbi John, like our house, but even other people during the course of the week to open up our house and to open up even to other people, maybe people we don't know, is an opportunity this Passover. Think about how can we open ourselves up safely and how do we close ourselves up carefully. I think it's quite profound. It's not easy. It's changing. Beautiful point, Jenny. All right, other thoughts about the story, what we might say? Okay. I just want to just go a little bit to the beginning of the text here. It says at the beginning, it's a mitzvah to tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt to children, even if they don't ask. And then at the very, very end, it says, even if there's nobody there, a person's alone, the person should ask questions of themselves. The truth is, we're going to be in an interesting situation. We're both going to be potentially alone, but together, right? Some kind of combination of those things. And even spending the time asking those questions at least allows us to engage in a conversation internally. But I want to say here about telling the story. One of the things that's profound about Jewish tradition, if we pull it back for a second, is the idea when things have happened to our people, we don't forget them, particularly when we're in suffering moments. One of my favorite teachings, like I've taught this before, is a famous teaching by Rabbi Ephraim Oshri, who is a Holocaust surviving rabbi. I've taught this before to you guys. He got a question from a woman, a Holocaust survivor woman, who had the tattoo on her arm. And she had survived the war. She was living, I believe, actually in Israel. And she asked the question, can I take the tattoo off? I'm embarrassed to have it on. I'm not ashamed to be a survivor, but she was dating, trying to meet people, and everyone looked at her tattoo on her arm. And she asked the rabbi, can I remove the tattoo? At that time, in the 1940s, 50s, to remove it would take a lot of, it in itself was a marking. And as many of you know, tattooing is against Jewish law altogether, okay? But obviously the Nazis do it. It was against your will. That's a different issue. But to remove it, you actually need to scar your skin. So the question she was asking was, can I scar my skin to get rid of this tattoo? Because I don't want to have it, I feel uncomfortable in my social, I want to move on, basically. What can I do? And the rabbi really struggled with this question because he was really sympathetic to this young woman's desire to become, to normalize and to not see it as something that stops her from being in the world. And his answer was poignant, it was harsh, it was strong. He said, you can't remove it. You can't remove it because by removing it, you lead for the potential that it will be forgotten. Not necessarily by you, but by others. So you cannot remove that tattoo. You can cover it with a piece of cloth or some way of wearing a shirt, because if it makes it uncomfortable in social settings, and you can cover it, but you cannot remove it. And his argument basically was this profound Jewish message is we don't take the exodus from Egypt or whatever tragedies happen to our people and delete them. Like, we're not the deleting people. We are the remembering people as a source of never forget, and hopefully as a source of, and we can overcome. We can keep on going. We're not the deleting people. We're the hold on to and keep going people. Same thing here with the exodus from Egypt. You can imagine some people saying, oh, enough already. Why remember our suffering? Let's focus only on the land of Israel and getting there and the promised land. Why so much focus on the slavery and the struggle? And it's his answer as well. We can never forget the struggle. The struggle itself and the pain, the suffering is the inspiration to do that for others, is the inspiration to be careful with ourselves, is the inspiration to have sensitivity to the world and its suffering. So I want to say that in this situation, when we share the Pesach story, I think we should share not only that, but also think to ourselves, how are we going to record this particular Passover for Passovers to come? Please, God, someday we're going to look back on this Passover and say we had the most craziest Meshugana Passover ever. You won't believe it because of this coronavirus. Please, God, it only happens once, and it only happens now. But there's going to be people that we need to tell this story to, future generations, that they know that not every Passover is sitting around a table that's so luxurious. It's actually a time where the spells have been under struggle too. But we didn't let go of the practice. We still told the story. We still passed it on. One of my amazing teachers, Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shlomi, also teaches about this moment. He says Passover's technology is that it believes that you have to take the story and you have to pass it on. Generationally, but also horizontally. It's not something you should hold in. You should pass on that story to other people. And that's the way it doesn't get forgotten. It becomes embedded in rituals. And so too, even this particular coronavirus moment, I hope some of us write down notes of what it feels like. Maybe if you don't keep a diary now, maybe this is a time to keep a diary. Your own little version of your own exodus, in a sense. That can be something recorded for future generations. I've been contacted, some rabbis in a triangle. Apparently Duke University or something they're asking for synagogues and churches to send out any emails they send out about this crisis. They want to collect them because already there's people in PhDs who are going to do an analysis of how houses of worship dealt with this crisis and their celebrations and ritual for the future. So it's an important moment also to teach how are we dealing with this so future generations can know how we dealt with this too. That's how we pass it on. Okay. Yefeh. Unless there's any other comments or questions, we're going to move on to text number 2. Raise your hand. Any questions or comments about this? Awesome. All right. We are going to text number 2 over here. We are, and God remembered. I'm moving down on the screen here. All right. We're going to get into some verb. We're now going to get into some hyper close readings of a Torah text, which I love, about the Exodus story. Do I have a volunteer who willing to read in English from Exodus 2, chapter 2, 23 through 25, about our story, and again, what we can learn from it? Terry's got it? All right, Terry, thank you so much. Teresa.
A long time after that, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites were groaning under the bondage and cried out, and their cry for help from the bondage rose up to God. God heard their moaning, and God remembered. And God remembered God's covenant with Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. God looked upon the Israelites, and God took notice, knew of them.
Exactly. Thank you, Terry. Okay, so here's the classic rabbinic question. This is the way Rashi and Talmudic rabbis look at a text. All right, why? There's a couple interesting questions. First of all, Israelites are groaning, our people are groaning, crying out for help. God, look at the verbs: heard our moaning, remembered the covenant, looked upon the Israelites and took notice of and then knew us. All God had to say was, oi, the people are suffering. I need to take care of them. Why does it require, first of all, that God has to only responds after hearing our groaning? Okay, what does that say about God, first of all? And then second of all, why does so many verbs? Like the classic understanding of reading the Torah is, if God could have understood something in one word, God would have. Why does the Torah need to say so many different verbs to describe the process by which God decided to help us? Groaning, remembering, looking, noticing. So first that question before we get into the issue of how to look at this in the coronavirus. Any thoughts about why there are so many verbs to describe God's behavior? And then why, even like theologically, why did God have to wait till we moaned? Couldn't God see us in our suffering before the moaning? What's going on there? Any thoughts about that? Okay, raise your hand. Stephanie, what do you say?
Well, I just don't understand why, if they had been there for that many years, why is it just then that the Israelites cried out? Were they not like crying out to God before that? And so maybe this was the first time, and so maybe that's why, God responded.
Okay, I'm going to say, let me go to a very powerful path. One, either we were enslaved for a long time and didn't cry out, and God thought perhaps it's okay. I don't know, whatever. Okay. Or we did cry out and God was decided not to listen until a point. Somehow it changed and then God decided. In either case, there's problems with it, right? How could we suffer for such a long time and not cry out? Although I think we know in there that is a true profound point, right? Stephanie already has an answer. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Well, I meant more that
Go ahead.
I guess if people want God in their lives, they're going to have to turn to God. And so, maybe they were crying out, but maybe they just weren't crying out to God.
Oh, okay, that too.
For that amount of time. So maybe, it's a two-way street. So I guess, in order to get help from God, then you have to believe in him and have him in your life, that sort of thing.
I got it. Okay. So maybe they were crying out in general, but not crying out to God specific, right? And I think that's possible. Of course, the challenge in that, of course, is like, well, if they're just crying out, like imagine, like if a child's crying out, even if the child doesn't say mommy or daddy or whatever, or teacher, you'd think that someone who cares about the child would respond anyway, even if it wasn't their own child, right? You'd think. But I think you're saying something interesting here. Somehow we had to cry out to God for then God to hear it. And then God had to remember that God had a connection with us. Covenant is basically saying relate. It's a little like, Gaval, like, shouldn't God know what the God's doing? I mean, didn't we have a whole set of stories for all of Genesis? But I hear what you're saying. No, you're making a good point. I mean, this is the tension. This is like the big koshi. Why? Why does God need so much nudging, basically, and specific? I think there are some answers, but I'm curious. Anyone else have ideas here? Why so many verbs? Why remembering? Jenny, Bakasha.
So maybe it's not that God needed so many things, but just showing that when we say that God is omniscient, it's not just all sort of knowing, that there's a lot of ways to know, and God does all of them. God knows through sort of what we think of as vision, that all of it's not just sort of knowing, it's sort of all the ways of knowing that God is doing there.
I think it's a very cool, Jenny. Nice. Very rabbinic answer. I like that. No, you're fair. No, it's basically it's saying like God has a multiple response. It's not just one, like saw it, heard it, knew it, whatever. It's all these. God is like the ultimate responder, ultimate first responder, in all these different ways, and it's like all encompassing. And that's a very powerful idea, all together. I mean, the only thing I just want to. I mean, again, all these arguments are these are arguments for the sake of heaven. But the issue of remember, like to me, it like comes across a little bit like Gaval, like you forgot it, like. But maybe you're saying like, well, God had to. It's part of God's, so to speak. This is anthropomorphic. Maybe it all happened at once. Maybe it all came together as once. Maybe it all was experienced. Right. No, I get it. It's like
this is like he was like, well, they also text me that
right.
Would be. It's like those are all of the ways that God knew it.
Right. God saying the people weren't on my Facebook feed, so I didn't know they were there. Kind of, Okay, other thoughts here about these different verbs? Okay. So let's look what Rashi's do, because the rabbis are dealing with this question. They're confused. Why taking so much? And here, I'll read this one out just to save everyone a little time. God took notice of them, knew them. The word is Yeda Elohim. God knew is the word Yada, to know or take notice. God turned God's attention to them and did not hide God's eyes from them. So, what's Rashi saying? In my view, it's saying basically like implied. Up to this point, God was perhaps aware in a general sense that the people were suffering, but really focused God's energies fully once they moaned and cried out and refused to kind of be distant or disconnected. God was like, I'm on it. Okay, I got it. Which, I think of this a little bit in terms of like the rise of the Me Too movement. Like there's been sexual harassment and, just to give one example, for millennia. But it took courageous people, women, journalists, to state it out loud in public, in media outlets, after it's been stated a lot before, but wasn't listened to in the same way, wasn't treated, even by the court system, in the same way, to really call attention and like demand enough, ad kan, it's it. So I think Rashi is also kind of saying here, like, the calling out itself is important. One might even say that God waited because God wanted us to call out. That God didn't want to just respond and quote unquote save us until we called out and demanded God's attention. I want to hold that for a second because I think that could be profound about our current situation. What it means to say that God isn't going to respond until we demand a response from God. By the way, if you replace God with other authority figures, the government, religious leadership, society, whatever, saying they won't really respond until you put it in their kepi, like in front of their punam, like in front of their face. It's demanded something. You catching the metaphor here? Okay. Let's look at the bottom here. Ibn Ezra, medieval rabbinic commentator who is famous for looking at very close analysis of the text back in his medieval time. He doesn't like to get off the text. He likes to give a very straight answer called the pshat. Nothing, midrashic, nothing creative. He likes to stay close to the text. But he's also confused by this. He's struggling. Look what he says. God looked upon the Israelites. God took notice of them or knew them. More literally, God saw and God knew. According to the philosophers, this is first answer. He offers a couple answers. There are two kinds of knowledge. Knowledge of what is existent and knowledge of what exists only potentially. So he's saying, look, there's two types of knowledge. There's what's happening right now. I'm sitting here at a chair. And what's going to happen. And supposedly God knows the quote-unquote what is possibly going to happen down the road. Potentially. Not guaranteed, but possibly. According to this view, God saw what had already been done to the Israelites. And God knew, therefore, what was going to happen in the future. So when God saw what's happening now, God was worried. But then God got really worried when God saw where this was going. Okay, so it's not just worried about now. It's worried about the future. Again, relevant to now. Look at the next statement here. But the most plausible explanation of this verse is the text is speaking to God in human terms. Similarly, in Exodus, it says, I, God, have heard their cry. I know their pain. So basically, its whole commentary is just to basically say God really feels it in God's heart. But here's actually the most important part, I thought, of the whole comment. His third answer. But some interpret our verse to mean that God saw the slave labor that the Egyptians made the Hebrews perform in public. And God knew. So when God saw us, enslaved and building and whatever. But later than God understood, God knew the Egyptian oppression of the Hebrews also in secret. Meaning, God saw the external suffering that we had through oppression and enslavement. But then God realized the oppression and enslavement is not just external. It's what? It's internal. It's inside each one of the Israelites. And not only that, there's suffering that's going on in public that people can see, but God knows that suffering is also happening, oppression, in private quarters too. In a sense, God sees the suffering outside, but then God knows there must be suffering going on in the inside. Relevance. The truth is, I see, we all know that people are struggling right now on the outside. Getting food, social isolation, concerned about getting the virus, people who've gotten the virus, etc. That's what we see. But then there's the suffering that's going on inside people's hearts. The anxiety, maybe the depression, the sadness, the worry, the concern. And so, just what we see on the outside is important and it needs to be dealt with. There's also what's going on the inside, what's going inside the heart. And the fact that God didn't just see on the outside, God then realized it wasn't just external, it's also on the inside. And that's even how we should look at each other. Is that, thank God you're all here and you have the time and the ability to be here together with us and kind of give a virtual hug externally. But all of us are also feeling it, inside too. And that can't be ignored either. And Passover comes to help us to really say there's external things we can do, like eat matzah and hopefully drink some juice or wine and have a sense of, but really it's also to hopefully give us some inside hope, inside faith, to help gird us for those of us who are a little scared that it's possible for something to be different. Okay. Any thoughts about this, about God knows or God only hears the moaning, stuff like that on the inside and on the outside? Any thoughts about that anyone people want to share? I got a silent crowd. Okay. Here's my other thing I want to say about the moaning. I remember learning about Nelson Mandela. I've looked it on the line. I can't seem to find it. Maybe it might be apocryphal. But I heard this in a sermon a long time ago from actually a South African rabbi who taught it. Said that when Nelson Mandela was asked, when did you feel free after he's released, after 27 years in jail and Robben's Island, the famous story. And he said, you feel free when you were released? Did you feel free when you saw that apartheid was falling? Did you feel free when you realized that you were being noticed around the world? Did you feel free when when you began to, he did a lot of amazing things in jail. If you've read his biography, he'd do things to play with the guards and mess with them and use, he in a sense brought together the prisoners, and he did all these amazing things to, in a sense, organize in jail. And he said, no, I knew I was free the moment I cried out for justice. Because once I cried out against injustice and oppression, they couldn't hold me enslaved. They could physically hold me, that's true, but they couldn't hold my heart, hold my soul. My soul was now free. The ultimate enslavement is not just physical enslavement, it's when we're so shut down that we keep it all inside. That is devastating oppression and devastating enslavement. And so what I want to say, I think about Pesach, the beauty of it is about talking, is that we really should feel comfortable in this time with the right situations, people like rabbis and good friends, perhaps with therapists people can connect to share not just our struggles on the outside, but also what's on the inside. Because there's a freedom that can come, at least a little bit, from sharing what's the suffering and struggle on the inside that even God sees and knows, according to this text. And in fact, you might say that God was not ready to act until we were willing to raise up our voices. So when we hear political things or things happening that we feel are upsetting to us, even in our houses, it's not enough just to sit back and take it, or sit back and be frustrated. It's so important to speak up with our voice. We gotta groan for justice. We gotta groan for a future. We gotta groan for people's attention. It's not enough just to say quietly. We gotta really let it out. And then that way change will happen, is only when we groan. Another thing I think we learn here. So in this crisis, there's all kinds of news stories, including today about our Senator Richard Burr. If you guys heard about that story. Okay, well, our senator apparently, this is yet to be fully adjudicated, so I don't want to step ahead of the news cycle, but the latest information is that he sold stocks based on information he had about the potential for the coronavirus. He has his own explanations. He says these things were not done anywhere in concert, etc. Yet to be the full coming out, but he's gotten universally decried and condemned across the spectrum, regardless of party, for in any way benefiting, God forbid, off this crisis. That's the kind of authority figures that need to hear our voice. We need to groan out and not just take it. And so it's a groaning of our own anxieties, but it's also a groaning of what happens out in the world. Okay. We have a couple of last minutes left. I had one more text, but maybe I'll save it for next week. What I wanted to offer here is I wanted to offer a chance for us to go around the Zoom in our last few minutes to invite, you can pass, but to invite each of us, if you'd like to share one thing that you are hopeful for this Passover based in this challenge, what you are maybe thinking about in terms of Passover, about doing differently, or what you're hoping to get from Passover in this crisis. What do you hope what Passover might help you, please God, in your practice of Passover, given this coronavirus and how different it will be? So if anyone feel comfortable sharing what they hope Passover will bring to them this year in this crisis, just raise your hand, and I would love to hear if anyone has any thoughts about what they hope Passover will bring to them. Bonnie and Charlotte raised their hand. Is that right, Bonnie? Oh, cool.
Possible Bonnie and Charlotte have not taken their shower yet today.
Don't worry. Okay. What are you hoping for Passover to give you this year, Bonnie?
I enjoy hosting Seder,
Yeah.
and so often when I'm the host, it's hard to participate fully and be part of it as well. You're worried about the food and the meal and the timing and the Seder and getting everybody on the right page. But given the reality that it's looking more and more like it will be Seder for 4, it'll really just be a family time together for us to really reflect. And it's not going to be about hosting and entertaining, if you want to look at it like that. It's going to be much more of an intimate and opportunity for more real discussion.
Mm-hmm. So in a sense, it's a significant loss, but perhaps an opportunity. I think it's a powerful way to look at this. There's losses here all around. What could we gain from it? Maybe less focus on the delicious quality of the food and hosting, right, but a gain in the conversation. Yefeh. Thank you, Bonnie. Shkoyach. Okay, other people want to volunteer here? I see Stephanie again. Bakasha. Stephanie. We'll do Lauren next. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Well, in the last couple of days that I've been home, I've discovered that all my family and friends are home as well, and I've been able to connect with them way more than I ever have ever.
Yeah.
And one of my mother's very dear friends said that, she and her husband were just going to have Seder at their home in Florida, and I invited her to have a Zoom Seder with me.
Awesome.
Over Zoom, and that's really nice because I live by myself here, and I wasn't going to be able to go to the Seders that I used to go to in DC, so actually now have an opportunity to celebrate Passover with someone because she's home also. So
that's wonderful. Stephanie, I think it's so beautiful. I think for all of us, we're going to offer, me and Jenny also, but if we can connect with other people. I also want to say during the week of Passover, since it's a special week, it's also, even if you can do the Seders, although Seders are profound, it's an opportunity all week just to kind of spend time. Beautiful, Stephanie. Awesome. All right, did Lauren Griffiths want to say something? I see Lauren.
Yeah, I hear a crying child though. So I'll be very quick.
Okay.
My brother was supposed to come this year with his family.
Yeah.
What happened? Charlie bumped his head.
Oh.
It's nap time.
Yes. Cutie.
Anyway, I think absence makes the heart grow fond. And I think the people that aren't at our table will appreciate them more than if they were next to us. So I had planned to have, family with me, and now I'm not. And it'll just make me realize how much they're missed.
Beautiful, Lauren. So true. So true. Wow. It's true for all of us, I think. Thank you for sharing that. Others about what they hope to get from Passover this year in this particular moment? Okay, Jenny, please.
I'm also, the Passover that I hosted last year was quite disorderly, and I'm hoping to do a virtual one also with friends and family. My parents live nearby, but I'm trying to steer clear of them for their sake.
Right.
And so, but I think with them and some of my friends, including some non-Jewish friends, I think, yes, taking away the sort of hosting part and taking away the complexities of eggs and soup and things burning will sort of make it more relaxed. I'm hoping to get more, I think that Passover will bring me sort of peace and consistency. And I also hope that it brings all of us a decrease in the infection rate.
Please God. It's awesome. Thank you, Jenny. Anyone else for hopes for Passover this year, what it'll bring to them, what it'll give to them in this time? Okay. So, first of all, it's great to be together. Thank God to study together some Torah and some texts, to explore what it might mean to, tell the story in a new way, in different ways, to bring in, that Passover, is, in a sense, it's a privilege to be able to have this Passover tradition and to really do it together in ways that are meaningful, to tell our story and to tell our story today, what it's like to celebrate Passover in the coronavirus. And also our second text about what it means to call out. It's okay to call out. And to know that call out's not just external, but it's also internal. And the idea of the Torah says that God sees both. God sees the external cry and the internal cry. But a chance for each of us, to come together and try and make community. I think I've heard a lot of different people say basically that one of the major differences is the lack of the in-person hosting experience. And to really feel that profoundly also, hopefully, will give us even more appreciation for the future when we can come back together, God willing. So I want to wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom, a sweet, please, Shabbat. I know it's going to be complicated. Just FYI, Rabbi Jen and I will be doing candle lighting tonight around 6:30 on Facebook Live and stuff. And we'll do Havdalah together around 8-ish again on Saturday night. We're also on Shabbat morning. You can follow the live stream of Beth Meyer. Janelle will be leading it to an empty sanctuary, but we'll be leading a Shabbat service, including special prayers for those who are ill and struggling during this time. And definitely feel free you'll see more opportunities to get involved and to help others. If you are someone that will be willing to call other members of our congregation, we are organizing essentially a tree to reach out to every member of our congregation and really in the Jewish community in general, then please feel free to reach out to me and I will put it to the appropriate staff in our chesed. If you have something generally to offer, you think you have time, you'd like willing to get on the phone, if you feel that you're able to deliver food when you go shopping to help others who can't get food, those type of mitzvahs, definitely let us know here at the office at Beth Meyer because we're helping organize that. If you have an idea of something you'd like to teach, if you'd like to order a session like this of something that has some kind of Jewish content on even on loosely, you have a story to tell, a personal family story, something interesting, we're looking for opportunities to share. And also stay tuned for more classes about Passover and preparing for Passover as they come up. We're kind of developing our plans for next week as we speak. I'm sending you all so much love. I'm really going to be praying for all of you here, especially when we're lighting candles this Shabbat, and really for our world. Our world's going through so much struggle. And as Terry said beautifully, there are people suffering even more than me. So I'm holding them all in my hearts, really praying that we will find a way forward. I'm hopeful, but cautious. Be safe. Be healthy. Shabbat Shalom. Okay? Shabbat Shalom.